Starting at the top, this morning's Dharma talk by Reverend Jodo Clusin will be reflections on Sangha practice. Reverend Clusin practiced with Katagiri Roshi in Minneapolis from 1977 to 89. He received priest ordination from Shokin Weinkauf Roshi in 1994 and Dharma transmission from Shokin in 2010. Cliff is the head monk of Prairie Mountain Zen Center in Longmont, Colorado. He has a career as an accountant for nonprofit organizations and is a husband and grandfather. Welcome.
Well, thank you for being here. Great Tree is one of my favorite Zen centers. Sometimes I tune in on Saturday morning. So I'm very honored and happy to give a chance to talk. I'll be reading my talk a little more than I usually do, but the spirit to come through. So I tried to, there's a lot of aspects to Sangha, but practically speaking, I define Sangha as a community of people inspired by a similar Buddhist path. Excuse me, I have to clear my throat a second. I thought of mentioning it's good with the Sangha, it's good if people show up. But actually, people who have shown up in the past and people who might show up in the future are also part of the Sangha. The spirit of those people is present. I like the word Buddhist path because we are always moving on the path of time, whether we like it or not. So what makes a particular Buddhist path unique? There's several factors. We could say, well, this group is in such and such a tradition, but the group is really affected by the leaders, the organizers, and the people who are present. I co-led a Thich Nhat Hanh group for a while, and we had 4 rotating facilitators. And with that group, there were like different people every week. A lot of small groups, it's the same people every week, but this was different people every week. And sometimes I tell new people, well, if you didn't like it tonight, come back next week because we'll have a different facilitator and a different group of people. You might like it next week. But Sangha does not exist separately from the rest of the Triple Treasure. All 3 aspects, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, work together. So the point I'm about to make now is that Sangha really supports the Buddha and Dharma aspects. Simply put, and so does Zen Buddhism, Buddha is to take the posture of a Buddha the best we are able to. I think Buddha statues are a great role model for us. I look at a Buddha statue, I go, oh, thanks for that suggestion. So the posture of a Buddha, most importantly, your back is, more erect than normal. And the best way to do this is to not lean back on a chair, or it's really hard to do on a couch. in Japan, I saw these chairs with no backs. I guess they were more like stools. So sitting up straight, as long as the trick is if your butt, even in a chair, if your butt is higher than your knees, then your pelvis naturally tilts forward. And that supports sitting up straight. But everyone's back is different. So the best people can do, but the straight back doesn't really take many muscles. Like I said, once your pelvis is tilted. So you can really relax. That's an important part of Zazen, is to relax your shoulders, relax your face, relax your jaw, relax your belly. And I believe the posture of the Buddha naturally develops within us the qualities of a Buddha. There's stability, openness, energy. When the body settles, the mind settles, and wisdom and generosity arise naturally. I know this probably sounds way too simplistic. It's like, take the posture of Buddha and the Buddha qualities manifest. Well, anyhow, that's what I believe. But back to Sangha, for me, over the course of decades sitting, I have trouble motivating myself to sit by myself. I think when I was young, that was easier. I had more energy. I was more idealistic, and perhaps I was suffering more. So I really wanted to deal with the suffering by sitting. But now I just mainly sit with groups, and even on Zoom, I'm like, oh, let's look around and see if there's a group sitting now, because I find it very supportive to be sitting with other people. It just makes sense for me. It just encourages me. Otherwise, I'm thinking, I gotta vacuum the floor, I gotta go to work. It's like, oh no, now it's sitting time. These people are sitting, I'll be sitting with them. And sometimes I live close to a group, and there's, only 2 or 3 people in the morning. So I'll be lying in bed. I'll think, should I go? It's like, yeah, they'll be happier if I show up. It's kind of be nice to have a third person there. But humans, we're very open to I call immediate peer pressure. Like, we're very open to what the people around us are doing. So when we sit with others, subconsciously, it communicates to us, this is what's going on now. And so we can settle more deeply, my experience anyhow, we settle more deeply into our own immediate experience when there's other people in the room settling deeply into their immediate experience. So I think Sangha really promotes the practice of sitting, more intensely, and particularly if you're going to try to sit for longer hours. So meditation is really a practice of the body. And there's some other Zen practices we do with the body, such as gasho and bowing and ritual. So these forms in the Zendo, bowing when we enter, everyone bowing at the same time at the sound of a bell, walking together, facing the wall together, kind of doing things all at the same time. I call this ritual, it's the enactment of human harmony. As we do this practice with people, it just communicates subconsciously to us that this is a harmonious moment. People can be together in harmony as one group. Just it's just so simple. The bell rings and everyone shows, but that's wonderful. That's call it the enactment of human harmony. I met somebody and she practiced other types of Buddhism for a long time, and then she went to a Zen center and the bowing and the oryoki, and she was just super impressed. She said, this just promotes kindness, kindness in oneself. Was what she was getting out of Zen practice that she felt she hadn't been getting from some other schools of Buddhism. Okay, so that's Buddha. So Dharma is a studying of thinking about how does the mind work? How does life work? What are our aspirations? So when we read alone, one thing we're listening to is our own interpretation of what we're reading. We kind of translate that into our own understanding. But if we can study and discuss Dharma with others, then we're learning from their experience and their interpretation. It turns out reading the same words, different people have different interpretations. So by discussing and listening to each other, we can have a much deeper understanding of the Dharma. I always give this example. I sit at my desk alone reading about unconditional love, the unconditioned, and I can imagine unconditional love. I feel unconditional love, but I'm just sitting alone at my desk. It's like being with people, spending time with people. That's a place where how does unconditional love manifest? So Sangha really enables Buddha and Dharma to function in a more real way. So Sangha itself, I find, provides a lot of emotional support. Develop a sense of friendship, even if we don't know each other well, just sharing practice, sharing the silence. We can have kind of a trust for the type of people that have shown up. So there's a sense of caring. At Prairie Mountain Zen Center, we have regular times, especially on Zoom. I think this is important because in person, people used to talk afterwards. We have a regular time for sharing. Lately, many of us have relatives and friends in very ill health. So we share those stories with each other. So we kind of become a support group for caring about each other and our situations through that. Sometimes people make very close friends through a Sangha, but even if you don't, I think practicing together gives us some support and confidence. So one aspect of Sangha is hanging out, experiencing other people who practice what we're trying to practice. So when I was young, I was visiting a older Dharma friend one evening. Jeju, it was Craig Schaefer were sitting around talking on a summer evening. And I could tell he was just barely starting to criticize somebody, and then he stopped. He stopped himself and said, I'm not going to go there. And I thought, wow, people actually practice this. People actually practice not gossiping. Not gossiping is a difficult practice, it's kind of fun, it's like, no, you can stop yourself. You can change. So see that close and personal. So in my case, I arrived at Minnesota Zen Center to practice with Taejo and Katagiri Roshi and others when I was 25. And I was pretty addicted to marijuana. But both sitting every day, the weird thing about marijuana is it lasts a while, so like 3 days later, I'd be sitting in the morning and I could still feel like from a few days ago, I thought I might as well just hit myself in the head with a hammer. It's like, anyhow. So I made a whole new group of friends that didn't smoke pot, and that really enabled me to quit. I also had other emotional difficulties, and I was younger than most of the people practicing there. So for me, the Sangha was like having 20 or more older brothers and sisters who were very supportive of me, counseled me. That was so wonderful. I think it's no wonder I'm so committed to the path. I borrowed a friend gave a talk on Sangha, so I borrowed some of her notes. I told her I just wouldn't read her talk and write my own talk, but here's a quote from Gyalak Rinpoche. Going against our addictions, anger, hatred, and obsession is a tremendous challenge. The support of a Sangha, people who share the same interest in freeing themselves from addiction, who are acting together and supporting each other to achieve freedom, is immense help. So this doesn't just mean addiction to substances. This is our addictions to, he says, anger, obsession, whatever we're working with, it's very hard to do alone. It's very supportive to be with people on a similar path. I recently got an email from a fellow, I think he did send it to me personally, he sent it to all these Buddhist groups. He said he's made a vow to complete all the stages of meditation and become supremely enlightened. And then he's going to help all beings. And he's like looking around, somebody help set me up to do this? Like, I don't know, find a place for me to live and so I can spend my time. He's a pretty young person, but I'd also come across some other guy on the internet. I just felt so sorry for him. He had documented years of, the Theravadan practice is wonderful, but some people's understanding is kind of hermit practice. And he had statistics on all the times he sat for years and years. Impressive. And also his progress through the 10 bhumis, the meditative states outlined in early Buddhism, like how he was progressing. So with both these fellows, it just felt kind of sad. I felt they had a misconception, from my understanding, that they're kind of putting the cart before the horse. They're just, our goal is to go beyond our selfish obsession with ourselves, or at least make it manageable. And the best way to do this is to devote ourselves to others. So being in a Sangha, but not just a Sangha, what team are we on in our professional life? Are we tuning into our supervisor? Are we tuning into our coworkers? Are we tuning into our family? Are we tuning into people in the supermarket? In the supermarket, I like to look at people. I like to, feel we're sharing something. So our involvement with other people really helps us go beyond ourselves. And here's a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. When I say I take refuge in the Sangha, it does not mean that I want to express my devotion. It's not a question of devotion, it's a question of practice. Without being a Sangha, without being supported by a group of friends who are motivated by the same ideal and practice, we cannot go far. So my friend commented, Sangha is a verb. Sangha is it's a practice. So these are rather pleasant aspects to Sangha. Next, I want to talk about some difficulties, because we don't select who's in the Sangha. We practice with whoever shows up. And there's a good chance, probably over time, that a few people might press our buttons, get on our nerves. So it's kind of embarrassing. Well, I have this habit of some people, I just have a little trouble with them. They just, I don't know about you, maybe, hopefully not. Maybe you don't have those feelings towards some people, but I do. And other people I just actually like. So yeah, last time Reverend Anderson came to Minneapolis, there's, a huge group of people, about 40 or 50 people. And a lot of them I've known for decades and I've practiced with for decades. So the kind of three people in particular, I'm friendly with them. I don't think they know that they push my buttons, but I was shown my seat, and one of the three people was sitting right next to me for 5 days. And the other two were directly across from me. And there's a big group of 40 people. And I thought, this is wonderful. This is so wonderful. Hanging out with these friends that, I don't know, just their mannerisms kind of grate on me. But, so one thing I'd notice is people that bother me a little and people I like, they'll do exactly the same behavior. And the people that bother me, I'm like, my judgmental mind's like, look at them doing that, And then the people I like do and myself do exactly the same behavior. And it's like, oh, that's fine. This is just amazing. So we can learn. Anyhow, this is a very embarrassing incident to share, but it's just wonderful to see what's going on in our mind, what's going on in our heart. Another quote by Gelek Rinpoche. If somebody's behavior is really bothering you, it is a good indication that there might be something reflected in that person that you don't like about yourself. So I think a long time ago, everyone was cooking with cast iron cooking utensils. So there was this phrase that the pot is calling the kettle black, meaning they're exactly the same, but we don't see in ourselves what we see in other people, but we're seeing it in other people because we actually have it in ourselves. So then Thich Nhat Hanh says it quite wonderfully. If we lived in a Sangha where everyone was perfect, everyone was Bodhisattva or Buddha, that would be very difficult for us. Weakness in the other person is very important. And weakness within yourself is also very important. Anger is in us, jealousy is in us, arrogance is in us. These kinds of things are very human. It is thanks to the presence of weakness in you and weakness in a brother or sister that you learn how to practice. It is through our shortcomings that we learn to practice. So struggling with our reaction when we're bothered by people, through that we can develop patience. We can develop compassion. Patience with ourselves, patience with others. Compassion towards ourselves, compassion towards others. And this is a bodily experience. These buttons that get pushed, there's like emotional centers on our body. And our body can kind of mature and develop. So, like I said, I actually enjoyed the chance to be close to my friends that push some of my buttons. So I think there's a little, I don't know, I call it hazard of Sangha. I think kind of without realizing it, we become exclusive. I think this is a little hard to avoid because as I define Sangha, people are attracted to a certain Buddhist path. So these people might have similar backgrounds, similar ways of thinking. But the teaching is this is available for everybody. And then when a small group or a larger group, they practice together, there's a palpable bond, which is wonderful, but new people coming in just naturally might feel excluded. But Ketikiri Roshi used to say something, I was really struck by this. He would say, don't make a nest here. I was really, kind of surprised. But he's like, don't make the Sangha into, your comfortable personal nest. I took it to mean, don't make this particular Sangha and group of friends your whole life. You should be out in the world. You should make friends with all types of people, to do activities also that are outside the Sangha. So sometimes, people at Zen centers complain, well, where are the young people? Where are the people of color? Like, why is it just our same group? But part of my response to that is, look at your life. Do you have young people in your life? Do you have people of color in your life? Are you, sharing your life with all sorts of people? But I think each Sangha, we need to reflect on, how welcoming we are to new people. I wrote a sentence, seems a little harsh here, but we shouldn't just be blindly self-satisfied with ourselves and with our group. We should consider, are we open? Are we expressing that? So different sanghas try some things. Some people say, well, everyone should have a name tag, and then someone else says, I'd never go to a group where you had to have a name tag. And in a way, sanghas are clubs of introverts. It's like, people make me a little nervous, but wait, I can go feel close to people and not even have to talk. It's like, this is heaven, and then but introverts don't really feel they're being cold and unfriendly, but it can kind of come across that way. Also, the Japanese culture is different than American culture, and even Asian culture in general. It's inherent. This not sharing is kind of understood, but in our culture, not sharing is not understood. So we should consider. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about no Sangha. Practice of no Sangha. I know after I became a priest in Boulder, there wasn't a Soto Zen Sangha to my liking anyhow. And I thought, I'll just start a Zen center, and yet Zen is so cool, I'm sure people will show up, And then there were lots and lots of Buddhist groups in Boulder, and nobody showed up, I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. And then 1 or 2 or 3 people showed up occasionally, and I thought I set a world record for giving Dharma talks to 2 people. There was just one person I wouldn't give a talk, let's have tea. But anyhow, that was very helpful for me to practice giving a talk. But our Sangha has taken a long time to grow. But Shokin says those he thinks those first generations of Zen in China that everyone reveres, he says, he thinks it was just a small group of guys sitting in a barn, It wasn't what later happened in China with support from the emperor and monasteries with hundreds of people. So to keep our practice going with no Sangha is an aspect of someone who's so committed. They're kind of a teacher, but being a teacher, I believe, is available to you, all of you. If you've rooted yourself in practice, if practice has rooted itself in you, and you just continue, Because Komichino Roshi used to say, well, when you sit, just put out an extra cushion. Let people know there's a couple extra cushions in the room. So I'd like to end with a Roshi quote. Well, actually, my friend put this together. She starts off with a quote by Mr. Bonhoeffer. Sorry, forget his name. Bonhoeffer, well, he taught a clandestine group of deep Christian practitioners in Nazi Germany. And he said, it's not simply to be taken for granted that the Christian has the privilege of living among other Christians. Or, as my friend rephrased it, it's not simply to be taken for granted that the Buddhist has the privilege of living among other Buddhists. Katagiri Roshi frequently started retreats at Hokyoji saying, we were sharing the rare opportunity of religious freedom, a precious commodity scarcely available in the history of the world, down to the present time. So if you study history, and what's other cultures and religious persecution is very common. So I think we are very lucky. Sangha is very precious. Sangha is very fragile. And that's why we should value it. So I'm hoping we can have a discussion.
Thank you. I want to start out by saying, can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Okay. Thank you very much. This is a great kind of start to our year of the Sangha here at Great Tree. I think you made some really valuable points. And I've asked various speakers to talk about Sangha this year. So I'm really grateful that you did that. I want to make a couple points. One of them, when you started out, you were talking about the spirit of those who have shown up in the past and those who will again show up in the future is present in Sangha. And I feel like that is such an important thing to remember. Sometimes I look around the room and I can see Sangha in the room. People have brought various items to Great Tree that have, and even our Zafus, our Zafu, we have a Zafu maker, Zafu and Zabuton maker here, nearby here. And so many people have contributed so much. And I think we have a tendency to look around the room and say, oh, there's only one or two people here. So, I'm doing something wrong. I haven't really created a Sangha here, but when you were talking about that later in the talk, I was thinking about how the last time I was at Eiheiji, it was just, there were plenty of monks there, but they were just a bunch of young guys that were playing at being a monk, I felt. And I feel like when things get to be too big, they become somewhat institutionalized. And so, yes, everyone can follow the forms, and that certainly is a practice of Sangha. To like what you were talking about, the harmony of, I can't remember exactly how you said it, but the harmoniousness of just being together. Oh, the enactment of human harmony. That's a beautiful, beautiful image, I think. But that the spirit of the practice is certainly there in a lot smaller groups, and I think it can be felt sometimes more strongly when you have less people, because certainly the harmony and the disharmony come up and you have to deal with it when you've got less people. So thank you for making all these wonderful points, and I'm sure that other people have things that they want to respond to too, so I'm going to leave it at that. But thank you.
I wanted to ask you some things about Zoom. I'm in Georgia, and the only reason why I'm here, and you're even further away, Colorado, and Chris is in Pennsylvania. Okay, so Zoom is great, and I'm grateful to Tejo for embracing it when COVID came along, to make it possible to do this. And I would like to hear your experience, because you've talked about Zoom and in person. You know, is there a what is the difference for you between like how you can settle deeply into your immediate experience, which you mentioned that. I like that idea. You know, I like that whole description of the experience. Is there like an elemental difference between doing it in person and doing it on Zoom, or how does that settle out in your experience?
So I find Zoom is pretty good for Zazen and pretty good for Dharma talks and discussion. In Zazen, we're experimenting with an etiquette of people leave their camera on, but the people actually turn sideways and face the wall, so we're not distracted peeking at each other's faces. You can get away with so much on Zoom that it's not, yeah, there's stuff missing, but it's good for, I find it's good for Zazen, it's good for Dharma discussion. And for morning service, it's working well for me. I have some Doans that are already trained, and I'm at the altar doing my altar thing. But for new people trying to learn morning service, I tell them, it's all depending on your space. Some people don't even have room to bow. I'm just like, just do what works for you in your space, and nobody's looking at you during morning service. I'm looking at the altar, the Doans are doing their thing. Like, no one's looking at you, just do whatever works for you. And so some people during morning service, they turned their camera off for that. So I feel there's aspects of Zen that just do not translate to Zoom. You can't serve tea on Zoom. You can't do karaoke on Zoom. So then I think we should all be hybrid once, if the pandemic ever ends and we're back in person. But then hybrid's kind of hard. So finally, there was this brief break where we met in person for a lay ordination, and there were 15 people in the room that hadn't seen each other for a while, and 6 people on Zoom. And I walked out of the abbot's room after the final bows for lay ordination, and I walked past the camera, and we had totally left the people on Zoom hanging. We had just forgotten about them. Everyone was talking to each other. So I started to talk to the people on Zoom, but I was standing there and I realized they couldn't see my face. They could only see my torso because I hadn't checked with the camera. So I stepped back so they could see my face and was really trying to engage them. So yeah, it almost takes a staff to do hybrid well, to feel you're including the people in the room and including the people on Zoom. So I think it's mainly good. I think we should continue it forever. But it takes some techniques, and it's not the complete practice with your body that you can learn from being in person. Anyone else have thoughts about Zoom?
Well, I had an interesting experience at the teachers' meeting in Los Angeles. I was there in person, but many, many people came in on Zoom. And they have right in the, they have more of, it's more of a church-like room, you know, they have like a platform in the front, like a stage, and then all of the pews. And they had a big screen. And at one point, well, there was a speaker, but at one point we had some technical difficulties. And so while they were working out the technical difficulties, what happened in the room is that everybody started talking to each other. And what happened on the screen is all the people on the screen started talking to each other. So it was like two different groups, you know? So I kind of, I appreciate what you said about, you know, trying to keep the awareness of both at once. And that, I think that's just going to be a challenge. And it is different. It does feel different, but.
Chris, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you so much, Jodo. Thank you. What it's kind of like struck me when you were talking about sitting with three people that kind of push your buttons a little bit. And I think we all have that. I don't know. I do anyway. And you made a comment that, well, it's embarrassing to share. I thought you were going to share something else really embarrassing, but you were referring to those three people. So thank you for that. No, I thank you. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but that's something that struck me because I have that problem.
Yeah, we probably all do. It's kind of a joke when I hope some of you don't have that problem at all. So we should admit to them. But, you know, it is, you know, well, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, you know, this is human, this is real, this is what we do. But I think it's good to be embarrassed by it. I think it's good to be, well, I mean, this is silly that I don't like the way they move their chair or something in their tone of their voice. I mean, just let it, you know, let it go. Let the person be who they are and open up my heart.
You said something about Zoom, about experimenting with cameras on and not on. And, you know, I'm aware when I'm doing, especially when I do morning Zoom and there might be two other people there on Zoom, that it feels more, and I know some of it is for technical reasons that coming on a phone doesn't support a picture and all that, but it does feel like more presence if people are visible. What is your experience with experimenting with that with the people you sit with?
Well, I've joined many different groups on Zoom, and it's like every group has their own culture. And some groups, everybody's camera's off. I feel strongly it's important to keep your camera on and just arrange your space, arrange your practice to support that. I found if I make the gallery smaller, then I'm less distracted by the people. I think sometimes maybe people turn it off because they don't want to be distracted by seeing all the other people. Well, that's the discipline of Zen, is to look where you're supposed to look and not. So I think it's really generous and sharing to leave your camera on. Some groups actually require it. Like I said, each group has a different style. I have a little funny story about looking around. In Minneapolis, we always faced the wall. And then I came to Boulder. The Boulder Zen Center was Rinzai style. They sat in rows facing each other. But I hadn't developed the skill not to look at people. And I was surprised. I mean, I didn't know you could sit zazen without facing a wall. So oh, and it was up in this Tibetan shrine room with all this stuff going on. So sitting zazen across from each other, you're supposed to be looking at the floor. Oh, but I just did not have the discipline. I realized I could hold my head still and still move my eyes. And, look at people, but you're not supposed to look at people. I mean, their face, right across from you. It's like, no, that's not what you do during zazen. It's that. Well, if they ever saw me looking at them, they'd be looking at me too, and I'd be like, "What are we doing, looking at each other? We're supposed to be looking at the floor." So even without Zoom, just working out the discipline of how to practice and how to take care of our behavior, our state of mind, and our relation with each other still exists. Kenja?
Yeah, thank you, Reverend Jodo, for your talk. A couple of points really stuck out for me. I love that you mentioned how great Sangha and this practice is for introverts, because I'm very introverted, and it is, I get to be with people and also get to like mostly just listen or not talk. Oh, wow. No, my screen just shifted and it looks like everyone's in a picture frame. That's cool.
Yeah, that happened to me too.
Wow. Well, I've never seen that before.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I didn't know that was a thing. That's awesome.
We look like great works of art.
Yeah. And then, so a question that I've had kind of relating to Zoom, that I would like to pose to you and to the Sangha here. I noticed early on when Zoom became such a thing, is that now I could see myself, right? Like I have my self view, and it was so distracting, So, and I think that, I don't know, just speaks to my own self-centeredness and vanity and all of that. But I became very like, oh, like, what's my hair doing, and has my screen okay, and am I central, and then is my raksu on correctly, and is it straight? And so I finally realized that, like, oh, I could hide my self view. And it was like, oh, so I don't know if that was like, it was a good practice for me to like kind of see myself and like work with that, or was me removing the self view avoidance, or was it helpful because I wasn't getting distracted? So I don't know what do folks do? Do you usually have your self view on or off, and what's that experience been like for you?
I'll say that I often, if I'm on for a really long time, I turn off self-view because I do get self-conscious and it gets weird. And it's like, it's not a helpful form of awareness. It sort of spirals. So I will do that. What I wanted to comment was oh dang, and now I just having a senior moment, lost the name. But when we did the Alexander technique, her name starts with an M. She talked about being aware of your whole body, that on being Zoom, you sort of focus in on the little light for the camera and you lose, and learning to that, having someone talk to me and making conscious efforts when on Zoom to remember the whole room and not just narrow the frame down changes my experience of sitting as well.
So I have mixed feelings, Genjo. In a way, I feel it's good to worry if our Rakusu is on straight. I mean, that's what we do in person, and if we're sitting straight, and then I adjust my screen. I try not to have my screen like this, I try to or like this. I try to well, it's polite to set my screen so that I'm centered. But then, like I said, in Zazen, if I'm not the leader, I just turn sideways to face the wall. I can't see myself or anybody. And I get out of full gallery and go to little thumbnail gallery. And then it's not such a big deal. In thumbnail gallery, you can also, or it's just a learned practice. You learn to stop being so, you can be on Zoom, have your photo there and stop being obsessed with yourself. Well, once your screen is adjusted and you're adjusted.
I sort of like seeing people sitting on the screen, and I like seeing, I think the side view is probably the most helpful, because then I think there's a sort of a strange feeling of seeing somebody on the screen that's just looking straight at the screen for me. And yet I like to see somebody. I like to see people sitting on the screen.
I had a couple of comments. Thank you for your talk this morning. I resonate with what I've heard from several of you, being an introvert as well. So I have my Dharma brother Genjo mentioned that, and I have that too. So, but I'm really grateful for the Zoom format because last year I went to my first session online. And that's how I became part of Great Tree. I continued along and took the precepts in the fall. I was able to be there in person, but I think if I hadn't had the time, the leisure of time, I was not teaching at that moment. I didn't have classes. I could be on Zoom. It was difficult to travel, and people were quarantining. So it's really the only way that that I could have done this last year, and I have found it to be really good just to be able to just to go to things here and to go to talks, because I'm out of state. Like Anne mentioned, she's in Georgia, I'm in South Carolina, so it's really been a huge benefit to me. So I'm glad that Great Tree is doing it, and I kind of have to sometimes when I'm sitting, I have to log in twice because I'm sitting at my computer now with my virtual screen, but what's behind me is actually in the corner of the room. So I actually log in on my phone if I want to sit in profile. So it's just a little bit of an extra thing to do. Another thing I wanted to mention really quickly is about tension within Sangha. I'm also part of a group here in Greenville that meets at Furman University in a small Japanese temple that was actually imported from Japan and donated by an alumnus. There's a group of 5 people who have met since 2016 there, and they're wonderful people, and I really feel like I've gotten to know them well. But we did everything on Zoom during the pandemic, and it got to the point where even on Zoom, there were things that would come up that were annoying. And although I agree with this person and we're left leaning, he was extremely expressive about political views to the point that I started to get super annoyed at the end of Zazen because we might have a discussion and he would launch into basically a political monologue. And I just thought, wow, that is really jarring to go from meditation and be in that space of calm to really something almost approaching like a political speech. So I'm trying to find a way to skillfully deal with that, and I haven't said anything, and I'm not planning to say anything. I'm just sort of letting it sit. But it's also good practice to have that awareness, I think. But the things that you were saying brought those things up for me. Thank you.
Jodo, do you want to say anything in closing? I noticed that we're a little over time. And then we need to wind this up, I think, and do the giving back the merit and any announcements. But Jodo, do you have anything you want to say?
Only thank you very much. Thank you for the good discussion. And it's wonderful to spend time with you.
Thank you very much for coming. Do we have any announcements that we need to? Daigaku is speaking next week, right? Daigaku Rame, and he's speaking about Sangha too. We're going to be hearing a lot about Sangha this year. Is there anything else we need to mention?
I just reposted the Dana links or the Dana link and the address to practice Dana in the chat. So please give what you can. And yeah, thank you, Reverend Jodo.
Yes, thank you. Okay, this is a call and response. If one person could stay on and respond so that I can hear you, and everybody else mute yourself. May the merit of this practice
May the merit of this practice
benefit all beings
benefit all beings
and bring peace.
and bring peace.
Thank you all.